Hello, I'm Death's Arrow, and welcome to episode 4 of What I'm Thinking. In this episode, I'll be focusing on scouting and the T-50-2. In my opinion, the T-50-2 is the best pure scout tank in the game, as it has incredible speed and agility. But it takes more than just a fast tank to be good at scouting, and in this episode, I will share some techniques that I learned to be successful in that role. From a historical perspective, the T-50-2 was the original design for the T-50 by the OK-MO Design Bureau in the Kirov factory number 185 in 1939. The Design Bureau was gutted during the Great Purge and was unable to continue the project. The Voroshilov factory number 174 took over the project in May of 1940 and changed the design. The T-50-2 design by the Kirov factory was never built. The intent of the T-50 project was to replace the T-26 infantry tank. The T-50 was intended to become the most numerous Soviet tank, an honor which ultimately was taken by the T-34. The T-50 was an advanced design for its time, with torsion bar suspension, diesel engine, and well-sloped, all-welded armor. Also of note, all T-50s were fitted with radios, which was only reserved for commanders' vehicles in other Soviet tanks at that time. The weakness and demise of the T-50 was due to the unreliability of its engine and the high cost of production. In World of Tanks, the T-50-2 is essentially a T-50 on steroids. It's faster, more maneuverable, has better armor, and better guns. When the tank was first released into the game last year, it quickly became a nightmare in pub matches. The tank's combination of extreme speed and agility made it very difficult to knock out. It wasn't uncommon for a T-50-2 to be able to dance around an entire enemy team and survive on a regular basis. This quickly led to the tank being labeled as overpowered. As time went on, though, pub players have become better at dealing with T-50-2s, and hence the effectiveness of the tank has since decreased. The reasons for this will become clear in a moment. Scouting, as a role in World of Tanks, is one of the most misunderstood parts of the game. Part of this has to do with what the game considers a scout, as many of the so-called scouts aren't well suited for that role in game. Tier 4 tanks getting pulled into battles with Tier 9 tanks is a source of frustration for many players, and in some cases, I understand the frustrations. In others, like the T-50 and the Leopard, which are true scouts, these frustrations are a lack of understanding of the scout role. While many players feel that scouts aren't well rewarded by the game, there is a lack of understanding of what actually gets rewarded by the game engine. There are 5 ways to get experience points in the game. There is first spotting, damaging enemy tanks, lighting up other tanks for your team to damage, capturing the enemy base, and defending your own base. First spotting is when you are the first unit on your team to spot an enemy tank. Damaging enemy tanks is a no-brainer, but difficult to do as a scout, as you typically don't have a gun that's capable of reliably penetrating high-tier enemy tanks. Lighting up enemy tanks for your team to damage is when you continuously spot enemy tanks, while other tanks on your team damage them when they can't actually spot them themselves. The spotter gets half of the experience of the damage done while spotting for other tanks. For a complete list of what actually gets rewarded by the game engine, I recommend reviewing the World of Tanks wiki under the Battle Mechanics section. In my experience, there are 4 scouting techniques used in game. The most common technique is what is referred to as suicouting. This is when the scout tank immediately takes off towards enemy lines at the start of the battle and attempts to plow right through the enemy lines to light up as many enemies as possible, as well as try to get through to the enemy artillery. While this technique can have a major payoff if the scout can break through to the enemy arty, it also has a number of drawbacks. First off is a lack of support, as the scout has already outraced any tank support, and friendly arty typically isn't ready to fire on the spotted enemy tanks, particularly if the scout is quickly destroyed. Secondly, the enemy will be in the process of deploying, and will still be generally massed up. This means that the scout will encounter a hail of gunfire, and I don't care how good you are at evading and juking, you will get hit, as pub players have gotten better at leading their shots on scouts. You also won't survive long, hence the term suicouting. Any scout lasting longer than 2 minutes is typically lucky, as they chose a route that the enemy didn't defend well. The second scouting technique is passive scouting. This is when you find an advantageous position behind soft cover and light up enemy tanks for your teammates to shoot at. Light tanks in particular have good camo values, and the speed to escape if they get spotted. The key to employing this technique is to not fire on the tanks you spotted, as firing will give away your position. I personally do not use this technique very often in general, but it can be useful in the right situation. The third scouting technique is active scouting. This is when the scout zooms around, popping up over hills or from cover to light up enemy positions, and then just as quickly they get back behind cover, The key to this technique is to try to make your runs as unpredictable as possible to avoid accurate fire as you spot the enemy. The fourth scouting technique is what I refer to as exploiting, and this is the technique that I employ. I have to give credit where credit is due. I learned the basics of this technique from a former clanmate, Baby Oliphant, who was willing to teach me how to use the T-50-2 when I first got the tank. The keys to employing this technique are patience and judicious use of the minimap. What you don't do is race off at the beginning of the match. Instead, you find a safe spot near the spawn and wait to see how the battle develops. The bonus to doing this is that you will be in position to intercept and destroy any enemy scouts that sue-a-scout. Next, you need to watch the minimap and wait for the enemy to disperse from their spawn and engage friendly forces. Once the majority of the enemy team is spotted, you need to try and pinpoint where the holes in the enemy defense is and make a run towards that area, and then modify your plan depending on what you run into. If you can break through that area, go for it. If you can't, then pull back and look for another hole. There's also nothing wrong with employing a passive or active scouting technique as the need arises. Just exploit whatever the enemy gives you and help your team the best you can. You may or may not survive the match, but if you've done your job properly, you've disrupted the enemy enough to help your team win. By the way, 99% of the time, when a player posts in a match that they've done their job, typically they haven't done anything useful. Feel free to mock them. I do. The best part about this technique is that it's useful no matter what map you end up on or whatever the team makeup is. Some scouts lament being in battles without arty, as they feel that killing the enemy arty is their role. I have no such issues, as being a pest or distraction to enemy tanks is just as useful. Ninja capping the enemy base can be a huge distraction, as enemy tanks will try to retreat to stop you, allowing your teammates to get flank shots as they attempt to disengage and return to base. The T-50-2 is perfect in this role. It has the speed to get anywhere on the map in short order, and the agility to dive between cover and keep solid objects between yourself and enemy tanks. The M24 Chafee can also fill this role, but in a different way, as the Chafee has a good gun and can be an effective hidden flanker. In general, you want to avoid getting shot, and I recommend the following equipment for your T-50-2. A vent to improve all crew skills, from acceleration to spotting distance, coated optics to enhance view range while on the move, and a camo net for those times when you need to passive scout. The only other equipment option I would recommend would be a binocular telescope rather than coated optics if you plan to do a lot of passive scouting. For crew skills, I recommend camo first. It's still the most useful skill for a scout, and one lesser known thing to keep in mind is that light tanks keep their camo bonus even when moving. So anything you can do to enhance that will help you survive longer. After that, I recommend a mix of crew skills to improve detection and mobility, skills like recon, designated target, clutch braking, and off-road driving. Brothers in Arms could also be useful as it improves crew skill. The first replay that we'll be looking at is a solo battle on Swamp from April 15th, 2012. The map for the battle is Swamps. The central feature of this map is a marsh with a town to the north and south. Bases are located at opposite corners. The flanking routes are constrained to 2 bridges. Typically, the main routes of attack are the northern and southern flank routes. The middle is typically a no man's land due to the bad terrain. Neither side of the map has a particular advantage over the other. Reviewing tank composition for this battle shows the following. This is a Tier 8 top tier match with a KV-5 on each team. My team has more Tier 7s and more scouts, as well as better scouts. The enemy team has better arty. I don't recognize anyone in this battle. I'm starting from the base 1 spawn on the west side of the map. As the battle starts, I move over to our cap to wait and see what develops. An enemy tank has charged across the south bridge. This is likely a sue-a-scout. If he gets through, I'm in great position to intercept him. Turns out the inbound tank is an enemy scout, a VK-2801. I take a few shots at him, but he's quickly taken out. 2 more enemies are crossing the south bridge. I make a decision to head north and try to spot some enemies. As I move north, our other T-50-2 is making a sue-a-scout run on the enemy base. Not a smart move running into that much firepower. I hang back behind the rocks here, looking for an opening to cross the bridge. I make my move and get over to the small hill at D4. I'm positioned on the east side of the hill using the rocks on my right for arty cover. As an ARL-44 gets spotted, I take a few pot shots before retreating into cover.
That one didn't go through.
I notice a T-20 behind me. He's distracted and likely can't see me, so I take some shots at him.
Looks like that one went right through. Punched right through their armor. Penetration. That one didn't go through. That one didn't go through. Enemy is hit. Nice shot.
Eventually, the T-20 moves to cover, and it's time to move to a new position to see how many enemies are still near their cap.
The track is damaged.
A Tiger P and a Stug are a bit more than I can handle. Breaking through on this flank isn't looking so good. So I retreat back across the bridge to see if there are any openings on the south flank. As I reach the south flank, the T-20 is still lurking but weak. I make a flanking run around the rocks to get behind the T-20.
We nailed him bad.
I catch him from behind and quickly take him down.
They're knocked out.
The enemy KV-5 takes a shot at me and misses. Time to pull back. I won't be able to hurt him from this distance. As I circle around, I decide to blow right past him and make a run for the southern bridge. I use the buildings as cover and easily make it to the bridge. As I head up to the enemy spawn, I spot two AFK tanks. Free kills, but I hold off on them as I spot an enemy M41, which I know is active and a priority target. As I close with the M41, he spots me and begins to turn. He misses his shot, and I take him down in a few shots.
Nailed him bad. That's gotta hurt. Got him.
Still ignoring the AFK tanks, I make a run towards the enemy base. With those two tanks out of the fight, I know that the enemy base is lightly defended. As I climb up the enemy base, I first spot a VK-3601 and then a Hummel. The Hummel takes a shot and misses. I know I have him and close to take him down.
Enemy armor is hit.
I make a slight judgment error by hitting the boundary line, but quickly recover and pin the Hummel so I can finish him off. The 3601 is turned to fire on me. I make a move to get away, but he gets a shot in and tracks me. I know I'm in trouble, so I use my repair kit and turn on the remove speed governor to try and escape. He gets another hit on my tank, which damages my ammo rack. Not really a big deal since this tank fires so fast as it is. I roll over to the AFK KV-3, who has actually turned his turret in my direction, but he's knocked out before I can get behind him. I then turn back and get some snipe shots at a Stug, while that 3601 hits me again and tracks me. I figured he'd finish me off, but he doesn't take another shot.
We fixed the track. Let's roll.
I now move up and try to spot the 3601 for my teammates to fire on. He ends up moving up, which allows me to get some shots in on him, and we finish off the match.
Enemy armor is damaged. We didn't penetrate their armor.
Looking at the victory screen, I racked up 3 kills and earned 1,771 experience before the 5 times, which is a very good match. Also of note is the 29,422 credits earned. While you don't make a ton of credits in a Tier 5 Scout, it still makes a profit, in this case more than 20,000 credits after repairs and ammo. I fired 51 rounds, but only hit 29 shots. Firing on the move tends to drag down your hit percentage. Overall, I positioned myself well early to take on the enemy scout that never made it through. I likely pushed to the northern flank too early, which is why I played it fairly conservatively once I got there. Knowing to pull out from that flank to try another route was a smart judgment call, as there was little chance I would have safely made it through to the enemy base. As a scout, I normally don't recommend directly taking on enemy tanks when they have help, so flanking out that T-20 was the key to getting that kill. Once the T-20 was out of the way, it opened up the southern flank for a run. While AFK tanks are free kills, it's important to make sure that there aren't live targets nearby that can get free shots on you. This can also be a double-edged sword, as I've seen AFK tanks suddenly wake up late in battles. The second replay that we'll be looking at is a platoon battle on Live Oaks from April 17, 2012. I am platooned with Jovial Madness and Hearticon in their Object 212 artillery. Live Oaks is one of the new maps that came out with a 7.2 patch and is the first map set in North America. The center of this map is a bog. A rail line with a bridge is located on the eastern side of the map. A town is located on the northwest corner of the map. The bases are in the southwest and northeast corners of the map. Typically what I've seen on this map is mixed flank pushes towards the town and rail lines. The only tanks that typically go up the middle are fast movers. It seems that Base 1 is easier to defend than Base 2 due to the large buildings located next to that cap. Reviewing tank composition for this battle shows the following. This is a Tier 9 battle. We have better Tier 9s, the enemy has better Tier 8s. While the enemy has a Tier 8 arty piece, we have 3 arties. Our team also has scouts, while the enemy has none. I don't recognize anyone in this battle. As the map loads up, we're at Base 1 in the southwest corner. I plan to hang back early on and see how things develop.
Let's go.
Most of my team is headed towards town, leaving the rail line lightly defended. A T-54 is spotted on the rail line, which could be trouble considering how lightly this flank is defended. I move up to do some spotting along the rail line. I spot the T-54 along with the T-20, not really enemies that this tank is capable of taking on. An enemy light tank is making a move towards our base. I turn to intercept, but he gets knocked out before I can get a shot off. Hardicon gets counter-batteried. He likely wasn't moving after shooting. I haven't played Artie on this map yet, but it seems that Artie gravitates to the corners of the map, which makes counter-battery easy. With the rail line flank swamped by 5 tanks and the middle clear, I decide to make a run up the middle. The run is just as clear as I expected it would be. The enemy has a 4-tank lead and is feeling overconfident. As I move up to the enemy base, I spot a Tiger lurking near the buildings. Undeterred, I continue my run and spot both enemy Artie. They likely didn't see me coming as I caught them off guard. The Tiger gets a flank hit in, but only a tracking shot would have slowed me down. I quickly move in and take down the T-92. Then start firing on the M4043.
Looks like that one went right through. Looks like that one went right through. Looks like that one went right through.
As he moves behind a building, Jovial finishes him off. It's now me versus a Tiger. I take the smart route here and utilize my mobility to circle the Tiger. I just keep myself as far away from his gun as possible and keep taking shots. The Tiger driver is making a key mistake here by only rotating his turret. If he rotated his hull at the same time, he might have been able to get a shot at me.
We nailed it bad. That one out. Penetration. That's gotta hurt. We've just dinged him. Penetration. We just dinged him. That's gotta hurt. That one didn't go through. Penetration. Ricochet.
As I continue to chip away at the Tiger, it's clear that the driver is frustrated as he gets a few shots off but misses wildly each time.
Penetration. Looks like that one went right through. Looks like that one
As I finish off the Tiger, the team has made a nice comeback, and now we lead the match. With all enemy tanks accounted for, I move to cap to ensure a victory. The enemy makes no attempt to stop me as I cap them out for the win. Looking at the victory screen, I made 2 kills and earned 2,058 experience before the double, which is a great match. I landed 37 of 40 shots, which earned me a sniper medal, along with an invader medal for my solo cap. Much like the last replay, I earned well over 20,000 credits after repairs and ammo. Overall, it probably wasn't the smartest move to cover the rail line early on, even though the flank was lightly covered. I kept a close eye on the minimap before making the key run up the middle to the enemy base. I knew the majority of the enemy forces were either in town or on the rail line. As the enemy base was lightly defended, I took on their arty first, which became important to our team's comeback. If the enemy base had more defenders, going right for arty would have been suicide. In that case, you're better off retreating and trying again, or just spotting for your own arty to take them out. Circling an enemy tank is a good tactic when you're one-on-one, but not advisable if there are more enemies around. Normally the engagement with the Tiger would have been more dangerous, but the driver wasn't skilled enough to know to turn his hull along with the turret to try and track me. Thank you for watching this episode of What I'm Thinking. I'd like to give a special thank you to Eliminator, who suggested that I use replays from the current game patch for the series, which I made sure to do in this episode. I plan to continue to use more current replays in the series from now on. Stay tuned for another episode soon. In the next episode, I plan to take a look at the E-75.